Now we're going to do a couple of quick demonstrations to show you how to shorten and lengthen these skirts. So I'm going to use the skirt that we created as the A-line design that we created from the block. Now folding this one in half, I'm going to take 20 centimetres off the length, and remembering when you take 20 centimetres off the front, you also need to take 20 centimetres off the back. So I'm going to start with the front. Now my finished measurement of 20 centimetres is coming from the hem, so that's not including the seam allowance that we already have here. So using the ruler, I'm going to mark 20 centimetres along here, and remembering in order to keep the shape, this shaping, we need to follow that curve rather than putting our ruler down here and drawing a straight line across. So 20 centimetres to the stitching line sits about here, and I'll mark that across. 20, and that's all the way to the edge. Now before I cut it, I'm going to replace the seam allowance. So I'm going to leave 12 mils along here. And again, before I cut it, I'm going to draw the measurement off the back and make sure that they match before I finally cut that piece off at the bottom. So 20 centimetres, measuring up from the stitching line all the way across. Before I add the seam allowance, I'll just check the flow through. So coming over here, my notches are matching, and I come down and I'm pretty happy that those two junctions are flowing nicely. Now I'll double check with this side just to make sure that I'm not putting a bump in here, and that flow looks all right. So we'll add our seam allowance over here now. And we're ready to trim them both. Now rather than doing this line all the way across the bottom, I've kept the centre front on the fold so that I'll pin that and cut that. Okay, farewell to this section. Now I've cut that off, so I'm going to replace this arrow, pin and cut the front . And we have shortened our skirt. Now I'll show you how to lengthen, and we'll lengthen the skirt that has a lot of more flare in it. So I'm using some large scraps of paper that I have and placing the end of the skirt off on here. So now I know that I want to add 15 centimetres in length to this, so I have just enough paper here, and I'm going to tape it on. Alrighty, so I'm going to start with the back, and we're adding 15 centimetres. Now you can either measure 15 centimetres from the stitching line or the finish line and then add your seam allowance again, or we can add seam allowance to 15 and then extend it from here and just do one line and then add our notches. So to make that little shortcut, our hem is 12 and we're adding 15, so that means from the stitching line we're adding, alrighty, so 16.2 down to here, and we'll keep going. This line needs to be extended straight. So remember, when we're adding length, we're not adding it on at an angle at this point. We will need to make sure that that side seam or the center back seam is extended smoothly. So I'll do that before we start. Okay, 16.2. So we have our additional 15 and the 12 mils for the seam allowance. So I'm keeping this part of the ruler as straight as I can against the hem so that the curve I get on the bottom is following as accurately as I can. Now you can either use the straight edge of your ruler around here to smooth that line, or pop a section of the French curve on it. That works. Okay, now we need to put our hem notches down here. So 12 mils and then eliminate that notch there. Eliminate this one over here and add another notch down the bottom, 12 mils. Now we're going to add the 15 centimetres onto our front, and to go for that symmetry, I'm going to fold it back in half again. And marking a line 16.2 from the stitching line. And extending the side seam down. Getting rid of that notch and adding our new hem notch. And pinning it before we cut it out. And we have added length to our flared skirt pattern.